that doesn't get talked about is some of these TPS recipients, not all but some, have been doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers who left Haiti. How is Haiti as a nation supposed to rebuild itself when we've brain drained a lot of their talent and planted them in Springfield, Ohio, where that's not fair to the residents of Springfield, Ohio either. And as a nation, we are legally obligated to our own citizens before we're obligated to anybody else. Springfield, Ohio, notice how the migrants are never brought to Nantucket, they're never brought to Beverly Hills, they're never brought to Martha's Vineyard. They're never going to go compete with hedge fund bros who inherited the job from their dad. They're always going to be brought to middle America, places like Springfield, Ohio, where they're going to have to compete with Americans for wages, depreciate those wages. I'm sure, does anybody at this table, have you heard the name Aiden Clark, an 11-year-old boy? No, you guys don't know his name?
Here we go.
11-year-old boy killed by a Haitian immigrant under TPS with no American driver's license who rammed his car into a bus, killed 11-year-old Aiden, and injured 20 school children. Who is this good for? Not the Haitians, not the American people.
I love how they cherry pick isolated cases and forget the fact that people who are immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than people who are residents in this country. But getting back to the point of this discussion about Haiti, first of all, I'm so glad that you're concerned about Haiti right now.
I am. It's a sovereign nation.
And the alleged brain drain. But the U.S. State Department says, would you let me speak? Because I let you speak. The U.S. State Department says that it's actually not safe for Americans to travel to Haiti right now. So you want to dump these people into our country where even our own State Department of the Trump administration says it's not safe. But the larger problem is that this is a country that is now governed by a racist foreign policy and a racist immigration policy. At the same time, Stephen Miller is out here claiming that we don't allow anybody into this country for asylum anymore. The doors are closed. We're allowing white South Africans to come to this country. Those are the only people who can come to this country right now, white South Africans. But 350,000 Haitian Americans who are black can't stay here, even though they have been here, many of them for many years. They can't stay here. They're tax-paying people. They are law-abiding people. They are people who actually do jobs and create jobs. They're actually people who are doing jobs that some Americans don't want to do.
No, like they want the jobs. They just don't want to do it for that wage.
Cleaning toilets. They don't want to do it for that wage. In a hotel.
And big business, the healthcare industry loves to keep them here. It's modern slave labor.
You oppose slavery. You're not the only person at the table.
Just a second. I will say he did let you finish your.
What's up, family? Real talk. A Trump supporter just walked onto CNN, dropped receipts on their entire panel about immigration, and watch what happens when they realize they can't argue with facts. Let me break this all the way down in plain English. See, this is what happens when you take emotion out of the equation and just sit with the numbers. The panel starts melting down. They start calling people names. They start screaming about racism because they don't have a logical response to what was actually said. This whole thing is a masterclass in how the media operates when the truth shows up at the table. And I'm not here to tell you what to think, family. I'm going to show you what actually happened, break down the policy like we're sitting at the barbershop or something, talking about real life, or a coffee shop, because I love me some coffee, not to get off topic here. And then you can make up your own mind. But I'm warning you now, once you see how this works, you're going to start noticing it everywhere. So let me start with the basics, because a lot of people don't actually understand what TPS is. TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status. That's just a government way of saying we're letting people stay in the country for a certain amount of time because their home country is dealing with some serious problems. War, natural disasters, that kind of situation. Now, here's what nobody wants to talk about. Some of these temporary protected status recipients, not all of them, but some, they are doctors. They are lawyers, they are engineers, they are teachers, these are skilled people. And when you take the skilled people out of a country like Haiti, you're creating what's called a brain drain. Think about it like this. If I took all the best builders, all the best teachers, all the best business people out of your neighborhood and moved them somewhere else, how's your neighborhood going to rebuild itself? It can't. And that's what we're doing to Haiti right now. And I get it. People want help. People want to be humanitarian, but we got to be real about the consequences. These Haitian doctors and engineers aren't going to Nantucket. They're not going to Martha's Vineyard. They are not competing for jobs with hedge fund guys who inherited their position from their daddy. No, they're going to Springfield, Ohio. They're going to Atlanta. They're going to places where regular Americans are already struggling to find work and keep their wages up. So now you got everyday Americans, people who've been in these towns their whole lives, competing for jobs and watching their wages get pushed down. That's not racist to acknowledge. That's just reality. That's just math. But here's what really gets me. We are not talking about the people who actually died because of these policies. An 11-year-old boy named Aiden Clark. You know his name? Probably not, because the media doesn't want you to know. Aiden was killed by someone here under the temporary protective status. This person didn't have a valid American driver's license, but they got behind the wheel anyway. They rammed their car into a bus full of school children, killed Aiden, injured 20 other kids. Where's the headline? Where's the outrage? Where's CNN talking about that, family? They don't care about Aiden Clark because his death doesn't fit the narrative they want to push. If it fit the narrative, they'll run that story on repeat, but it doesn't, so they bury it. And this is the difference between what the law technically allows and what actually helps people. The law says we can take in temporary protective status recipients. Fine. But that doesn't mean we ignore the real consequences for real Americans. That's not heartless. That's just honest. Now, here's what gets interesting with the refugee stuff, right? And this is where the panel really loses their mind. So with no further ado, family, let's get into it.
So South Africans are Africans. They are citizens of the nation of South Africa. They reside on the continent of Africa. For decades, this country, they are African. Whether they are white or black, they are African. And for decades, this country has taken in millions of refugees from several African nations that have been destabilized. Somalia, so much so that we've changed the entire demographic of a U.S. state. But Somalia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of the Congo.
What do all those places have in common?
We've taken in millions.
But what do all those places have in common, Caroline?
So now we're taking in, what they all have in common is every single one of those nations that I just listed, including South Africa, are African countries.
No,
and we've taken in millions from the others, but we're taking in 6,000 from South Africa, and everyone's up in arms.
All of those
Caroline, you know
countries
what's going on here, and actually
experiencing
6,000
war,
and it's embarrassing.
famine, civil war.
Please don't do
that.
It's so embarrassing. All are African.
It is not that, okay? Obviously, right? Those are places where there is actual conflict, where there is actual war, where people are actually being killed. Trump is basically saying the only people who we will let into this country are white people.
Yeah,
they're African.
He basically, no.
Whether they are white or black, they're African.
White
and
people.
they're facing
Caroline,
racial
you are making us look ridiculous right now. You are making us look ridiculous. This is a completely racist argument. You can keep talking, but it's completely racist. If I say only white people are allowed in, it's racist. It is racist. And then they gave them a gift bag of basically white Christian supremacist propaganda.
Okay, all right,
I don't know why you're going on about this. It makes us look absolutely idiotic.
Back up. Josh, back up. This is like I don't even know where to start with this. Is this how you actually feel? Like are you giving your real opinions right now? I feel like this is not how you actually feel about this
The United States has had an extremely generous refugee policy in regards to several African nations. Now that South Africa is one of them, there's a problem. When was the problem? When we were taking in millions from every other destabilized African
and it's embarrassing.
This is very deliberately obtuse, I would say. I'm going to kind of skip over some of this and say...
Can somebody explain the expropriation act in South Africa and what's going on there?
No, we don't want to do that, Caroline.
The first thing about that is that what you're saying, that expropriation act, no property has been expropriated. You know that, right?
No, that's not true.
It is true.
You read the executive order that the Trump administration wrote.
No property has actually been expropriated.
I think there's 6,000 South Africans that would beg to differ.
So you're talking about something that is basically hypothetical when here's the reality of life in South Africa. 3 decades after apartheid, which apartheid means that black people were subjected to laws that prevented them from living as equal citizens. Black South Africans, who account for more than 80% of the country's 63 million people, face far higher unemployment than their white counterparts, 35.8% compared to 8%, okay? White households average almost 5 times more wealth than black families. So, okay, in South Africa, I'm sure they have plenty of problems internally. But this idea that there is a genocide happening in South Africa against white people is fictitious. Here's one person who was brought into this country as a refugee. He says he left behind a Jaguar sports car, a Range Rover, and what he estimates to be property worth at least $300,000. He plans to sell them all so that he can come to the United States as a refugee. Meanwhile, we're saying to Americans, don't go to Haiti because you might die, but we want to send 350,000 asylum seekers, essentially, back to Haiti because Stephen Miller doesn't like Haitians.
Well, because it's a different program.
I don't think it's because Stephen Miller doesn't like Haitians. I think because
he said as much.
Okay, but I think the Supreme Court of the United States made that ruling. I don't think it's based on the executive branch.
Because the administration wants to deport them, yes.
Okay, but the judicial branch had 6 pretty intelligent lawyers who decided that
they were going to bend their will to
But Arthur, what is the logic of a policy that lets a guy with a Range Rover and a Jaguar sports car in as a refugee, but not someone literally fleeing essentially a civil war?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the answer
is... I don't have an answer to that.
If I can, I think we can back it up again to the gift bags. What other group of people have we brought into the country and given gift bags to?
Well, we've given a lot of Somalian refugees $18 billion worth of fraud to buy their own Range Rovers here. I think that's pretty generous of the American taxpayer.
Fraud you're talking
that's
about,
quite a gift
Caroline.
bag.
And let me tell you, we don't
prominently committed by Somalian
We got to go quickly.
I'm just going to say this is America at its most familiar to me, opening its arms very wide open to white immigrants and not black immigrants, and then telling you not to believe your eyes.
Are South Africans African? Are white South Africans African?
Next for us, we're going to read some of your feedback.
Now, before we go any further, we need to understand how the refugee system actually works, because that's where the real conversation gets shut down. The Refugee Act of 1980, Congress wrote this thing, not Trump, Congress. And you know what Congress said? They said the president gets to decide who comes in and who doesn't. The president gets to set an annual limit. The president gets to set a ceiling. The president gets to decide which regions of the world get priority every single year. That's the president's call to make. That's the law. This isn't something Trump made up. This is how it always worked. Always. Reagan used this power. He prioritized people fleeing communism. Cubans, Vietnamese, Soviets. That was straight up political. That was discriminatory by design. Nobody called Reagan a racist for it. They didn't run to Supreme Court crying about it. Obama came in and he prioritized Syrians. Biden comes in and he prioritized Afghans and Ukrainians. Every administration, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. They all looked at the world and they all looked at the politics of the moment and they said, we're going to help these people first. That's just how the system operates. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. This law is discriminatory. I mean that literally. The statute itself allows discrimination from a perspective because Congress built that in on purpose. It's not a bug. It's a feature. The president is supposed to be able to look at global situations and make strategic decisions about who benefits from American refugee protection. That's the whole point of giving one person this power. So when Trump uses the exact same power Reagan used, the exact same power Obama used, the exact same power Biden used, all of a sudden people are marching in the streets. All of a sudden it's a moral crisis. All of a sudden he's a racist. But they never said that about the others. They never protested when Biden was letting in Afghans and Ukrainians, but fewer Africans. They never made a fuss about that. And that's the hypocrisy we need to sit with, family. The law gives the president this authority. Congress literally wrote it that way. Every president has used it. But the moment Trump does it, the moment it's not the person they voted for, suddenly the whole system is corrupt. Suddenly it's racist. Come on, man. Let's be real for a second. If you don't like the law, take it up with Congress. Go to your representative, go to your senator. Tell them you think the president shouldn't have this power. Have that conversation. But don't sit on TV screaming racism when you had zero problems with the same power being used by someone else. That's not criticism. That's just picking a side and defending it no matter what. And this is exactly where the panel starts losing it, because when you present this logic, when you just lay out the facts about how the law actually works, you can't argue with it. You can't come back with numbers. You can't come back with constitutional law. You can't cite precedent because every president did the same thing. So what do they do instead? They call you racist. They attack the person instead of the argument. And that's exactly what we're seeing in this clip, right? Keith Boykin sits there on this panel and he says something that sounds real dramatic. He says, the only people we're letting in this country are white South Africans. That's racist. Trump only lets white people in. and the whole table start going crazy. You seen it. We just seen it, family. They're nodding, they're agreeing, they're acting like this is the most obvious truth in the world. But then Caroline Sunshine pulls out the actual numbers. And that's when you see the whole thing fall apart. Think about what we've actually been doing for decades, family. Decades. We've been taking in refugees from African nations, Somalia, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of the Congo. We're talking millions of people, millions from these countries. We open the doors wide open. We've taken in so many people from Somalia that we literally changed the entire demographic makeup of a whole U.S. state, Minnesota. Think about that for a second. Now South Africa. How many people have we taken in from South Africa over all these years? About 6,000. That's it, 6,000. So if the policy is to only let in white people, why have we taken in millions of black and brown Africans, but only 6,000 South Africans? The numbers don't match the accusation. They don't even come close. But wait, it gets worse because for their argument, because now we're talking about what makes someone African. A South African isn't African. Whether they're white or black, they're from Africa. They're African citizens. Elon Musk is from South Africa. If you didn't know that, fun fact. But the way Keith Boykin in this panel reacted, you'll think they don't count as African. You think white Africans aren't real Africans? And that right there tells you something real important about what's actually going on. And like I said, Elon Musk was born in South Africa. These people don't have a problem with African refugees. They never said a word when we were bringing in Somali refugees. They never marched. They never held press conferences. They never called anybody racist for prioritizing Africans. But the moment it's South Africans, specifically white South Africans, suddenly it's a moral emergency. Suddenly it's discriminatory. Suddenly Trump is a racist. You see what that is? That's a skin color preference. That's exactly what they claim to be fighting against. But they're the ones doing it. They are the ones looking at the world and saying, we want these black and brown people, but not these white people. And then they turn around and accuse someone else of racism. Now, Keith Boykin tries to bring up this thing about South Africans' expropriation act. He's talking about property being seized. And he's making it sound like this whole mass of white South Africans are being hunted down and pushed out their country. But here's the reality. And Caroline points this out. No property has actually been expropriated. This thing exists on paper. It's proposed. It's being discussed, but it hasn't actually happened. And he's talking about something that's hypothetical and using it to justify why we should or shouldn't let people in. But you know what? That's not even a real conversation. The real conversation is this. The president has the discretion to do so. Congress gave it to him. End of story. Whether South Africa is perfect or not, whether property is being seized or not, whether there's actually some crisis, none of that changes the fact that the president can decide who gets refugee status and who doesn't. That's literally his job. And that's the point that Keith Boykin and everyone on this panel refuses to engage with. They can't, because if they engage with the constitutional reality of how this works, they lose their entire argument. So instead, they attack. They say, you're a racist, you're disgusting, you're abhorrent, right? You're abhorrent. They're not even trying to debate the law anymore. They're giving up on the facts. Caroline's sitting there with receipts. She's got the numbers. She's got the constitutional authority, and she's got precedent from every other administration. And what do? They tell her she's making them look ridiculous. They tell her she's pushing racist propaganda. They do everything except actually address what she said. And that's the game, family. That's exactly the game here. Now let's talk about the goodie bag. They brought this up on a panel like it's some smoking gun. Oh, white South Africans are getting care packages when they come into the country. Oh, that's the scandal? That's what we're upset about? Okay, fine. Let's talk about goodie bags. When Biden had the border open, when millions of undocumented people were coming in, you know what they got? A lot more than a goodie bag, family. We're talking about plane tickets, bus rides, hotel rooms, and not the cheap hotels. We're talking about 5-star hotel accommodations in some cities. cell phones, cash assistance, financial support. That's documented. That's on record. You can look it up. Democrats spent hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, across liberal cities, maybe billions, supporting people who came here illegally, giving them access to social services, tax dollars, resources. That was fine. Nobody at CNN was having a meltdown about that. Nobody was calling it wasteful. Nobody was marching in the streets over it. But now a few hundred white South Africans get some basic assistance and suddenly it's a national emergency. Suddenly we're debating it on cable news like it's the most urgent moral crisis facing America. Where was this energy when millions were getting billions? Where was the outrage then? The answer is simple. They didn't care because it was their people. It was the administration they voted for. It was the policy they wanted. You could have brought them the receipts then too. Actual receipts showing the money, the resources, the scale of it. And they would have looked you in the eye and said, that's compassion. That's what we should be doing. That's so compassionate. Don't it sound familiar, Kamala Harris? With hopes and dreams and love. But the moment Trump's in office and he uses the exact same legal authority to let in a different group of people, suddenly everything changes. Suddenly it's racist. Suddenly it's a problem. Suddenly they want to talk about physical responsibility and fairness and the rule of law. Where was that argument 5 minutes ago? And here's what really kills me about this. If you actually believe the problem is that the president shouldn't have this power, fine. Take it to Congress. Congress gave him his power. Congress can take it away. But they don't want to do that because they don't have to admit the real issue isn't Trump. The real issue is that they like the power when their people have it and they hate it when the other side uses it. These people are the ones with a skin color preference, not Trump, them. They want certain people in and certain people out based on how they look. And then they turn around and call someone else racist for making any decision at all about immigration policy. It's just backwards. It's dishonest. And the family needs to see it. So John chapter 8, verse 32 says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This panel was trapped in emotion, trapped in a narrative they couldn't escape because they never grounded themselves in facts. The truth is what breaks those chains. When you know the truth about how the law actually works, how these policies actually function, you can't be manipulated anymore. You see the game. For those spiritual, when you know the truth, you're not shaken by lies dressed up as compassion. You see who's controlling the conversation through emotion instead of evidence. And for everyone else, this is basic critical thinking. When someone attacks the person instead of the argument they lost, they don't have an answer. They don't let anybody trade your ability to think for their ability to make you feel. A truth can live without a lie, but a lie cannot live without a truth. So with that being said, family, drop a comment, like, subscribe, share this with somebody who needs common sense. Spread the peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. On that note, peace.